everyone. I'm glad to have you here. My name is Jennifer Taylor, and I am the Director of Internships and Practica here at Westmont. Today, the Internship Department is honored to bring some graduates to our campus to talk about the experiences that they have had since graduating from Westmont. They are speaking primarily to my elected internship class, and if you would just take a moment to put your hand up so we know who you are. They're here to talk to this class, but to the Westmont community as well. And we're actually being taped today so that those who are not able to be here will be able to enjoy this presentation as well. It's my privilege and pleasure to be doing the important work that I do here at Westmont, which is connecting students with internships. And as you might imagine, people connections are vitally important in this kind of work. And this is why we bring this panel together. These fellow Westmonters are already now, or today, will be a sphere of influence for you and you them. And I think if there's one important thing I've learned over my years of working at Westmont is how very important and helpful your Westmont connections are during your years here, but it goes far beyond that in the years that follow graduation. But I'm not the expert on that, and we have some experts here. My current hope for those of you who are listening, students mostly in my class, is that you'll take some comfort from this, some instruction, some motivation, and some encouragement. So here is our afternoon format. Each of these alums will take about 5 minutes to introduce him or herself, talk about the current employer and what has transpired since graduating from Westmont. Then following their responses, I'll be asking some pointed questions. And I'd like to take 1 or 2 questions from attendees after each set of responses, but we can be a little bit flexible with that. If you are asking a question, we welcome that. I would encourage you to ask a succinct question so that we can best record it. Those were my instructions for getting it on tape. Really pleased, though, to have a discussion and for you to participate. Also, I want you to know that we're planning to end at 4:30, so if you need to leave then, please do so. But if you'd like to stay a few minutes after to talk to our panelists individually, I'm hoping they'd be okay for a few minutes after that time. Also, Anna Kate has passed out some evaluation forms, and I would be very grateful to you if you would fill those out. They're very brief, but it would be helpful to me to know how this worked for you, and we'll take your comments into consideration and keep trying to improve what we can offer you, the Westmont community. So I'm going to introduce our panelists briefly, and then I'm going to get out of the way because they can tell their stories better than anyone else. I will start with Josh. Josh Higa, class of 03, back in the summer of 2001, right before the Twin Towers collapsed on 9/11. I had the pleasure and the privilege of traveling with my family and a group of Westmont students on Europe May term. And Josh was a member of that wonderful group of students. In addition to being a fine student, I remember he was a quiet and thoughtful leader. And I also remember that he took the chance to play soccer with his classmates whenever he found the chance, in Europe, wherever he could find that opportunity. Then we have Emily Hughes, the class of 05. Emily was in my elective internship seminar back in the spring of 2005, which makes that about 6 years ago. Hardly seems possible. She had an internship at the Dream Foundation in town at that time. She was juggling many activities as so many of our students do. I remember one of her roles was that of spring sing director. But here's the thing that I remember about Emily, that she handled a lot of activity and a great deal of stress with grace and poise and enthusiasm, and that has stayed with me ever since. Emily has traveled from Los Angeles to be with us today. And finally, Brendan Moore, class of '07. I knew and know Brendan the least of our panelists because our paths didn't cross very much when he was a student here. But I do know that he played in the chapel band. I know that he directed the Spring Sing band as a senior, so I know he's very musically talented. And I was impressed when, not long after Brendan graduated, he posted an internship position on our internship website for current students. So obviously his hard work and his talent gave way to landing a professional position at a young age. One of Brandon's friends described him as creative, unique, humble, and fun-loving with a unique sense of humor. So these are our fellows. And Josh, let's start with you. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and where you are and what you've done.
Great. Well, Jennifer, thanks. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with some fellow Westmonters and get the opportunity to share some of my experiences with students. I really think the time that I've spent outside of school, I've learned quite a bit and things that I would have never in my life dreamed of. So I think hopefully we can get an opportunity to share with you all here. So that's great. I'm really excited to be here. Like Jennifer mentioned, I graduated in 2003. I majored in economics and business with a minor in philosophy. I was planning pretty much all 4 years, maybe 3.5 years of Westmont, that I would go to law school when I was done. I loved hearing Gary Haugen speak with the International Justice Mission. It was really inspiring to me. And I felt like that was the path that God was leading me down. And it wasn't until maybe 4 weeks before graduation that I realized law school might not be the best thing for me. And then I kind of processed that as we went through, finishing up school and then moving on into the summer after graduation, and continued to process and reflect on what God had in store for me. And eventually, the following year, in May 2004, a year after I graduated, I started working at Amgen. Amgen is a biotech company in Thousand Oaks, California. We have a handful of different drugs that we manufacture, primarily for patients with grievous illness surrounding blood disorders and cancer. And I was lucky enough to have an opportunity to get a start there in our finance group at Amgen, and have been there for just about 6.5 years since I started. I've held a number of different positions within finance. Currently, I am in our accounts payable group as a manager, and I'm working on globalizing several of our processes and incorporating our sites all throughout the US as well as in Europe. And I'm really, really excited about this, the opportunities that I've had at Amgen. I know for a fact that a lot of the things that I've been able to do well at this company are driven by my education here at Westmont, and for that I'm extremely grateful. Whether it was a specific class, whether it was going on May term, whether it were the internships that I was able to be a part of, I think it's all been helpful in shaping me into the person that I am today, that has been relatively successful in keeping a job for 6.5 years at the same company. Just for everyone to know here that's in the room, I did 2 different internships while I was at Westmont, since that's kind of the focus here. As part of the urban semester in San Francisco, I was part of the first class that was in the new house, so that was really exciting for us. And then I also did an internship over the summer here in town with the district attorney's office. So if any of you want to ask questions about that stuff, that's part of my background too. Emily?
All right. Well, Josh was very fortunate to kind of find his niche early on, and I've kind of had a more varied experience from when I graduated. I was a communication studies major. Are there any comm majors in the house? All right, just him. All right. So, and what was so wonderful about the communication studies major is that I felt very prepared to do lots of different things, but it did cause a little bit of trouble for me to hone down what it was that I wanted to do. As soon as I graduated from college, I went and worked at a high school camp, because that was something I always wanted to do during college and didn't have time to. So that was a tremendous experience. And then at the end of the summer, I realized that summer camp can't go on forever. And I needed to get a real job. And my loans were about to come right around the corner, so I needed to get real pretty quickly. And I ended up staying on at the Christian camp facility that I had worked the summer at, booking conferences and retreats for 3 out of their 5 facilities. And it was a lot of responsibility, and it was my very first job kind of thrown into the deep end a little bit in a really wonderful environment, where I got to learn just a tremendous amount. It was a nonprofit, and which was wonderful, but I did kind of feel a little bit of a little constrained in that there wasn't a ton of room for growth because it was a nonprofit, and so I kind of was eager and thirsty to get something where there was kind of more upward mobility, that type of a thing. And I also had some personal reasons for wanting to relocate, so I started looking for a job in a very specific area, and I looked for all sorts of different things. I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do, and I ended up taking a job, and I immediately knew that it was not the right fit. I immediately knew that, and I took it not really knowing what it was about. I kind of sold myself as someone who could do it well, and I knew that I could if I really invested in that process. But I knew right away that it wasn't going to be good. For my skill set and just for a variety of reasons. And so I was in a bit of a pickle. I'm like, so what do I do? Do I kind of honor this commitment that I've made and just kind of stick through and kind of bear down and just do it and see it through to as long as I could? Or do I kind of cut and run at this moment? And it was something that I sought a lot of counsel about and really prayed about, and I decided that kind of the wisest and most responsible thing to do at that moment was to move on. So I did, and I didn't want the company to invest any more in me when I knew it wasn't a good fit for me, because it would essentially ultimately not be a good fit for them. So that was a huge learning experience for me, to have perhaps done a lot more research about what that exact job would be and what it would be like for me, kind of knowing myself more too, to know what would be suited for me, as well as kind of looking more into the future. So anyway, at that point, I quit, and after I'd carefully lined up that job, because that's what you're always supposed to do. You're supposed to find a job before you quit your current job, all of that. So I didn't have any of that. So I moved home and was just kind of at a loss. What do I do? And I was fortunate to get a job where it was kind of a desk sort of job where I could be really honest and forthright with them and say, I'm looking for a career, and so this is kind of a temporary move for me. So I was able to have a job while I was looking for a job, and that took about 6 months. And over that period, I was really frustrated and really, it was hard, because I was trying to figure out what I was going to do, and I was almost a little bit desperate, I felt. And I applied for a ton of jobs. I was offered a number of jobs. A number of them I was really tempted to take, because I felt this just need to move on, and just kind of start going somewhere. And I'm really glad that I didn't. I'm really glad that I didn't just grab onto something that wasn't quite right. One position in particular looked completely like everything I wanted on paper. It perfectly suited for what my giftedness was, what my talents were, and looked like a lot of upward mobility, everything I wanted. But then I started doing some due diligence and learning more about the company and who ran it and what they were about. And I found that there were some unethical things with their company, and I really wanted that job. Like, it just seemed so perfect, but I was just like, no, I can't be a part of that if there's anything unethical about it. And so anyway, all that to say that I think that the Lord really used that process to confirm the position that I'm now in, that I found. I do corporate communications now for a women's fashion company in LA. And I kind of pinch myself sometimes because I feel very honored and privileged to be doing what I'm doing, and I feel like it's very well suited for who I am. The company is an incredible company with a ton of integrity and just always on the up and up in everything that they do, and so that's where I'm at now. So I essentially do like a lot of writing, communication strategy, and corporate support for our executive team. So that's my story in a nutshell. Sorry, I was a little lengthy.
My name is Brendan Moore. I came in with the class of 2008 and graduated in December of 2007. My time at Westmont, I was originally from Texas, so coming out to California was my big move in my life. When I came out to Westmont, I participated in 3 internships. Unfortunately, none of them were through Jennifer Taylor's program. The first of which I interned at a public relations firm downtown. I was a communications major, so I felt like I really needed to explore like the career paths that everyone was telling me that I needed to go towards. Public relations, event planning, the like. So it was with Davies Public Affairs downtown, and I realized that it was just not a good fit for me. It was my first professional environment, and there were a lot of things in the company where I just didn't enjoy what I was doing. I was working in the real estate sector for the public affairs company. I think it's a great company, it just wasn't for me. And that was the summer after my junior year, and then the fall of my senior year I went on Boston's urban program out with Gordon College, and their very intensive internship focus, just like San Francisco's urban program. I recommend it if you guys like the East Coast. But I was able to work with a company in the music industry, which has always been my passion. Since high school, I wanted to work on the business end of music. So I worked with a company called Sonic Bids. They partner independent artists with promoters and music licensors, trying to create sort of a middle class for artists so that they don't need a record label in order to back them financially. So it was a great opportunity there. It's a really growing company. When I was first there were probably about 40 people, and now they're up to about 150, based out of Boston. At the end of my internship, they offered me a job there, but I had a semester left at Westmont, or so I thought, and I went back to Santa Barbara and realized that I only had one class that I needed to take in order to complete my minor. So I decided to graduate and drop my minor, which was great because I didn't get senioritis at all. But graduating a semester early was actually a huge benefit for me because I was able to really devote a lot of time to searching in Santa Barbara for another internship. I wanted more internships because I knew that Sonic Bids was the right industry, but I knew it wasn't the right kind of company. And through a connection that I had at my previous internship, I found this company called Aniricom. They're based in town. They're a marketing firm that specializes in music and entertainment industry. So I went in. They had never had an intern before, but I volunteered to work with them. They were based out of a house. I was the 5th person there, and 3.5 years later, there's about 20 on staff and about 10 interns past that, and we've had a lot of Westmont interns come through. So my original job there as an intern, I was working with sort of a nonprofit record label that they ran. I was working on promoting artists and promoting a festival and a compilation CD. And then as that grew, I became more involved in the marketing and actually was able to develop a department of the company as social media was rising in the marketplace, and more of an artist were seeing that you really needed a presence on not just your website but your social media as well. So I was able to kind of like spearhead that department, and since there I went and I was the director of our new media department with a staff of about 6 underneath me, and now I was just recently promoted to campaign manager, so I deal with a lot of the marketing strategy and analysis for bands, actually coming up with the ideas in implementing them and having a team run them for me. But it's been a great privilege to work with Westmont interns. Every time we go, we post in UCSB and Westmont, and everyone in the company wasn't familiar with the Westmont name at all, even though the office is half a mile from here. So it's been great. We've had some interns, Justin Davis and Arissa, and a couple more that they've been able to work with us. Justin Davis we recently hired on part-time, and it's been great working with the Westmont interns. None of them have taken it for course credit yet. I don't know why, but I would love for them to take it for course credit, but that's where I am now.
This is highly interesting. Thank you for elaborating on so much that's taken place in a short period of time from my perspective. I wonder if you would highlight perhaps something that you feel you did very well in negotiating and getting to the place you are today, and then maybe something that you wish that you had done differently. I'm thinking of this as being somewhat instructive.
I'll go first. So I'll start with what I think I've done well, because it's always easy to talk good about yourself. One of the things I think that really, truly helped me through this process was developing a really strong network of peers, but also of mentors, people that I could look to, ask very real, very serious questions about, as an example, does it matter how much money I make? Or does it matter if I start in a nonprofit or if I start in corporate worlds? I always had a vision all through college, even when I thought I wanted to go to law school, what my kind of 35-year plan was. I kind of knew what I wanted to be when I grew up, further down the line. But I wasn't really sure the appropriate way to get there. And I was able to bounce my ideas off of a number of different people that I had in my network, and kind of ended up coming to the realization that, I always knew that I wanted to make an impact with nonprofits. But for me and my talents, the best way to do that and the best way to have the greatest impact would be to kind of work my way through a corporate program, corporate company, and then apply those talents kind of later on in life. So I think, network was really important for me, and I would say that is something that's really important not only for people that go into business. I think regardless of what you want to do, what your major is, if you are a scientist, if you're an English major, if you're, whatever it might be, and I think we can all three of us will attest to that. I think a lot of the way we are able to find jobs that we're so happy with is that we've been able to get out and talk to other people, find out what they do, what they like, what they don't like, and it's through those conversations that you're able to start honing in and tailoring down what it is that you want to do. And without those conversations, you wouldn't have any idea. And I think for me, one of the biggest eye-openers that the networking has done for me is there are literally a million jobs out there that I had no idea even existed when I was in college. So I think if you've got something in mind of what you want to do, but you don't know exactly how to get there or if it's even a real job, odds are it probably is, and someone's probably making a living doing that. But you just need to figure out who to talk to and get to the right people that would know. So don't lose heart if your ideal job is not something that everyone else does. But through a network, through a developed network, you might be able to find it. Thing that I kind of wish I'd done differently, and this sort of applies for me, but I think just in general as well. I've had a number of different Westmont juniors and seniors that I've been fortunate enough to kind of talk to and do a little bit of career coaching, but really just have conversations about my time after Westmont. And for me, one of the things I didn't quite recognize was sort of the calendar timing with when internships become available, the types of internships that I wanted would come available. And so let me try to explain that a little bit. at Amgen where I work, when we start thinking about the interns that we want to hire for the summer in October and November. So, that's a good 8 months before someone's going to even start. And so that means, if we are going to go out and think about hiring some undergrad interns, the fall of your junior year is when we would start looking at you and start, having interviews and just start to get a feel for the types of talents that you have and trying to identify how that might fit in with our company. And I had no idea that was the timing, not a clue. And I get, I've received and talked to a number of different students in the spring saying, hey, Amgen sounds like a really great company. Would love to work there or intern there. Do you know of any opportunities? And it's really hard for me to say, but the truth is we've kind of filled all those positions and filled them 3 months ago. So that was something that, I wish I had known. Fortunately for me, I was able to still get the internships that I got through the programs that I was involved with. So there's a number of different ways to get internships, but depending on the ones that you want, there might be timing that's a little bit different, and that would require some planning ahead. And certainly as college students, and I know I was right there with you, planning ahead wasn't something I was good at. Judging by the fact that it took me a year once I graduated, to even end up with a real job. So, but that's the one thing that I maybe wish I'd done a little bit better.
All right. Well, I had kind of touched on one of the things that I'd wish I'd done better at my one kind of intermediary job that I'd had. And so just to kind of reiterate that, I wish I'd done more research in terms of what the culture of the company was like, but also what the job was like and what it would be related to my giftedness. And then that kind of transitioning into what I feel like I did do right with my current position, and that is doing a lot of research and knowing people within the company that can speak to the culture of the company, and yeah, just letting me know that this would be a really wonderful place to work. So those were some pluses and minuses in my in my background.
I think one of the things that I would say that I was fortunate enough to stumble upon, I don't know if I consciously did it, but is gather experience through internships to actually learn about what I personally wanted to do. I think when you go after a job, if you're going to be successful at it, it has to be something that you truly enjoy. It has to be a company that you want to work in. So being able to bounce around through internships, I was able to kind of narrow down my list of where I wanted to work and what kind of culture I wanted to work in. One of the things that I wish I had done, and I'm still working on doing, I would say, is how Joshua was talking about kind of having a network of mentors. When you're working in a professional environment, you're going to come across a lot of questions that you can't necessarily get answers from work, and having kind of like a network of people that you can rely on to ask some of the harder questions that you might have is something that's going to be really beneficial to you.
You touched on, or a couple of you touched on, the liberal arts aspect of your education. We're working with different majors, and I'm wondering if you can give an honest assessment of how that liberal arts education helped you in your journey. And I'd like you to answer that, keeping in mind that the job market is a bit different today than it was when you graduated. It sounds like your companies are still hiring, however, so I'd love to hear from you with advice.
Anyone else want to go first? I'm fine. I just didn't want to steal anyone's thunder. Okay.
Like a rhythm.
All right. Sorry, I won't rock the boat. Sorry.
It's your turn.
Sorry. First question: anyone in the room business major? Okay, got a couple. Well, I'll say this and then let me just kind of finish. I don't think there is a single time in the last 6.5 years that I've been working at Amgen that I think back and say, you know what? This was a topic that we covered in accounting. I remember that page in my book. Let me go find that book and research it, and then great, I'm going to apply it to what I'm doing right here. So that's my honest feedback. But I don't think that's what a liberal arts education is intended to do. For me, the things that I take out of the liberal arts education that I have been able to apply are my ability to adapt to different situations and problem solve, have interpersonal skills, be able to communicate. One of the biggest things we look for when we hire someone is their ability to know themselves, know their strengths, know their weaknesses, be able to get along with other people, work in a team. A lot of really soft skills that are really very difficult to teach someone that didn't have a liberal arts education. And for me, when I think about the jobs that we've hired for, at the end of the day, for better or for worse, I can teach just about anybody to do what I've done in my first 6.5 years at work. College degree, not a college degree. Someone that's motivated, someone that knows themselves, someone that is able to communicate when they need help. Those are the things that matter more to me than anything. And I believe those are attributes that a liberal arts education will provide students. So, take my first point with a grain of salt, because there isn't ever a time that I felt disadvantaged because I wasn't able to recall a specific page in my econ book and apply that to my current job.
I feel very similarly. And I remember thinking kind of my senior year as I'm getting towards graduation that I thought upon graduation my head would just be swelling with like facts and figures and knowledge and all of this stuff. And I realized, I had this profound epiphany that I didn't have this long list of facts and figures that I was remembering. It was that I had gained critical thinking skills here. And really that's what it came down to for me, and what is the true value of a liberal arts education, and that is so transferable and applicable to any work environment, to anywhere you go. And so I felt just tremendously prepared for the different jobs that I've had. And I have a lot of friends, from high school that went to colleges that were more honed in on a specific subject, and they were essentially more limited in the job market because that was what they were suited to do. And I feel like a lot of my friends at Westmont, because of their liberal arts education, have a greater breadth of opportunities that are available to them. And similar to Josh, I think that when we're looking to hire people at our company, I interview people regularly to come in, and it's communication skills and critical thinking skills. We're not looking necessarily for a lot of knowledge and recalling that page from your textbook. It really is what a liberal arts education provides, is what we're looking for.
I have to echo you guys. It's all about adapting and critical thinking. I think I learned a lot about myself through hiring other people. Through looking at their resumes and seeing kind of how they approach their jobs. A lot of people, they get into one major and they feel like their career choices are really pinned down to that major. But one thing I found at my company right away is that my boss was a film studies major, and now he has nothing to do with film. And it really is, if you have a liberal arts education, it really is going to benefit you in the long run. And my roommate was a music performance major and just got a great job doing production manager. It was actually a music company, but his performance has nothing to do with his job there. But they could see that he was a bright individual and that he was able to adapt and, go into something that that you weren't trained for, but something that you can absolutely learn on the spot.
I wanted to pause and see if you have a question or two in light of what has just been shared. At this point, if you do, as we move on, please feel free to ask. We're happy to hear from you and to,
Can I ask a question?
you bet.
The job market can be very volatile, and the industries that you're in, I assume, are not, that they are also subject to that. And I'm wondering, do you keep your eye on the market and on possibilities in the future and where you might go from where you are? Is that something that you think about?
Yeah, so the question was, given the volatility in the market, even though the three of us are gainfully employed, do we consider other opportunities that are out there? Is that essentially what it was? For me, I know that is something that I do. Don't tell my company. They know, and they actually encourage that, because unless you know what else is out there, you don't really know how good you've got it. Mm-hmm. And so for me, certainly, I'm in business school right now, part-time at night. So I interact with a lot of different people from a lot of different industries, and I get to hear about what they do for their job. And 9 times out of 10, it only reaffirms my conviction that what I'm doing right now is the right thing for me. But I think I'd highly recommend that to anyone. If once you get lined up with a job, I think you should always be hungry for more. Whether it's in your current job, looking at different possibilities to grow, to get promoted, to take a lateral position and learn a new skill, or if it's something outside of the company. Highly recommend that.
Absolutely. To Josh's point about just learning a lot, I don't have plans to move on from my current position because I really love it and hope to be there for a long time. But I'm aware that anything can happen. Any company can fold, or any number of things can happen. But it's important to just be constantly broadening your skill set. And there's times when I think a project's presented to me and I could either pass it off to someone else or I could take it for myself, and I think this is something that I could really learn a lot from and could make my skills more transferable to a different field. And so I think it's wise to always be looking to how, in a lot of companies, you can get into a niche of what that company does, and without thinking of, okay, if this company didn't exist, where else could I be and how would my skills be transferable? It's just always wise to be thinking along those terms.
I don't think I can add anything to that. That was great.
Thanks.
I agree.
We're going to go in a reverse order then.
Okay.
You have a chance this time to answer first. I'm just going to throw out a question that is not necessarily related to work, and that is, has church been a part of your life since you left Westmont? Can you talk about what that's been like for you, whether you've been involved and what kind of a journey that's been?
After graduating, up into the 2 years up until I graduated, I actually was not attending a church steadily, and I was really focusing on my job. And in retrospect, it was just kind of an absurd thing, but in the past 6 months, I started attending Santa Barbara Community Church, and I've actually found a lot of blessing and guidance in my life, not just through the church teachings, but through the home group, and through other people that go there. And it's definitely been something that keeps my priorities in perspective. I would call myself, or I did call myself, a workaholic for 2 years, and I was just always at the office, and that was really what I cared about in my life. So I'd say I'm actually glad you asked that, because just recently that was a big transformation in my life, is kind of reevaluating my faith and my faith with what I'm doing in my work, and the type of people that I work with and how I deal with them as a Christian when I am one of the only Christians in my company. So church has definitely been just an uplifting and a learning experience, especially related to my work.
I've lived in a number of different areas in LA, so I've kind of skipped around a little bit from different churches, but I've recently found, actually for about a year. I've been going to a church in my area in Redondo Beach that I really enjoy, that has a lot of young people, which is fun, and getting involved in midweek Bible studies and things like that is a challenge when you work a lot. It's been a challenge for me to keep that up really consistently and be there every week with the demands of my job. So that's been hard, and it's essentially kind of a choice to be made. You know, every Wednesday evening, do I leave the office or do I go to Bible study? You know, but it's important, and yeah, it's important to keep to help you keep perspective in everything you're doing.
So I think for me, it was kind of an interesting experience. So I grew up in Santa Barbara, obviously, probably recognize my last name. So grew up in Santa Barbara, had a really great experience growing up in the Santa Barbara Community Church, home groups and the whole 9 yards. Was a student leader in the group and everything. And when I graduated Westmont in 2003, I stuck around Santa Barbara. I moved back home, no shame in that, and lived at home and did odd jobs, and was kind of feeling it going to Santa Barbara Community Church after graduating. It felt a little different for me. This was the church that I'd grown up in, went to the whole time I was in college, and when I graduated, I felt, I don't want to say adult, but I'll say adult. I felt like I was an adult. I felt like I was a different person, and that going to that church made me feel like I was still in high school. And so I kind of stopped going to Santa Barbara Community and went to some of the other churches in town and had really great experiences for that year while I was after graduation before I started at Amgen. And that was great to worship in new communities, meet new people. It was really, really wonderful. Once I started at Amgen, I got faced with a lot of the same challenges and that my cohorts up here have described. I probably was a workaholic for the first few years out of school. There are more fingers that I have that weeks where I worked 80, 90 hours a week. That was the nature of what I was doing. And what it took to really sort of solidify myself in this company. So I made a lot of decisions, in those first few years that kind of meant that I wasn't part of a Bible study, wasn't part of a church on a regular basis. But I would say, again, for me, growing up in a Christian household, going to a Christian liberal arts college, just because I wasn't present in a building that was called a church didn't ever mean that I felt any less connected to Jesus Christ. And for me, that to me is one of the biggest reasons why I was so happy that I ended up graduating from Westmont, and why I'm so excited to be back here now to be able to share and to try to be as involved with Westmont and current students as I possibly can, because I know that it's that foundation that was laid in the 4 years that I was here that really has helped me to continue to be the God-fearing man that I am.
So wonderful. We hear about students who kind of get lost a couple years out, and so it's really helpful to have your expertise and draw on your experience. I'm going to flip back just a minute to the topic of social networking. All of you have talked about the importance of networking, and I come to you truly, genuinely asking you, how is the best way to do that? And as a younger generation, texting, Facebook, LinkedIn, are you doing that? Are your companies doing that? Is that what our students should be doing right now? Can you talk to that a little bit?
I can.
Go for
Okay.
it.
I have a Facebook page and LinkedIn. I'm not super involved in LinkedIn, but I actually recently, when we were looking to hire someone, we got in a room and we were like, okay, how is it that we're going to find this candidate? We don't want to go through an agency that we've used before that isn't very successful. We don't want to, post an ad somewhere. We want it to be someone that we know. And so a bunch of us posted on our Facebook page, a little bit about a job opening, and we actually hired someone that I went to high school with through that process. So anyway, there's a tale of success on the web. So.
My job involves social media a lot, so I'm all over Facebook and Twitter and anything you've never heard of before, both for company purposes, business purposes, and personal. It's a very fine line of how you should approach people through that you don't know. It's hard to make connections on social media. It's social networking in a lot of senses, networking with people that you know in real life outside of the internet. But I fully support social networking. We definitely, if we're looking at a candidate, partly because of the role that we're hiring them for, we hire new media specialists that are interns. So we check to see if they're on these sites, and if they have their stuff hidden from us, that's great, because that means they know how to customize their page and they've been in it a little bit. So it's a little bit of a different game in my field. But I'm all for social networking. I think it's great. I think it's very hard to make connections, but it is possible for sure.
It's a good way to keep up connections. That's what it was in my experience, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really important clause. That it's a great way to maintain. I think it's probably challenging to start new relationships that way. I'd say sort of my experience is pretty different than Brennan's. That I do have a Facebook page. I don't really understand Twitter. I don't know, maybe I'm too old, but I just I don't get it. What's the point? It seems like it's just Facebook status updates all day. I don't know. But what I can relate is what we do at Amgen and how that stuff sort of plays into our hiring process. And kind of get back to the question in particular. In my opinion, is that we are hiring people. And if you want to develop a network, you have to be a person, an individual, a face, a body, not a Facebook page, not a Twitter account, not a LinkedIn page. I think those are great tools to sort of understand what's out there. But when it comes to making a hiring decision, we want to hire real people. And again, the liberal arts education has got everything you need to be successful in that sense. Whether it's the debates or whatever the other extracurricular activities that are going on. Spring Sing, even Spring Sing for me has played a bigger role in my ability to succeed in college, after college, than some of the courses that I took. Nothing against the professors.
I bet.
Philosophy was great. I loved it. But there are a lot of really, really great skills that I developed in those extracurricular activities that are extremely applicable in what I do now.
To be well-rounded.
Yes.
Totally.
I will say for LinkedIn, I haven't been able to use it to try to find a job yet, but I think it is important to keep up a presence on there, because you can, when you connect with people, it shows their connection. So I've had friends come to me and they're like, I saw on your LinkedIn page, this guy, do you mind introducing me? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Like, you would not have known that unless you looked at my LinkedIn page. So I'd recommend LinkedIn for the professional world, Facebook for your personal, and get Josh on Twitter.
Someone explain it.
I have heard a lot of LinkedIn success stories for exactly what you said. That person, can you introduce us? Yeah.
Excellent. Since this is being taped, I thought I should take the opportunity to let students know that we have at least a couple of other departments on campus that help facilitate these connections. Terry Bradford Rouse is here, and she's the director of the Alumni Office. And so, and I know they promote LinkedIn and all kinds of reaching out. And the Office of Life Planning with Dana Alexander and Celia Howen, I know they have been encouraging students to use LinkedIn a lot. It seems to be one of our more successful ways of finding opportunities out there. So, and it's fun to hear from you, and I almost feel like the difference in your ages and the years of graduation are telling, aren't they?
Oh,
That's
man.
okay, Josh. You're too old for Twitter. You're too old for Twitter.
All delightfully young, but questions at this point? I'm wanting to give you one last opportunity to mention something that we haven't hit on. Is there something else that you would like our students and others to know about your work or your involvement? Something we haven't covered?
I'll start if you guys don't mind. And this is really to highlight a point that Emily made earlier, but it reflects very truthfully in my own experience as well. And I actually jotted the note down. I said, I wrote, failure is part of the process. And I want to make sure that everyone understands that that is part of the game of life. You know, for me, failure was spending 3.5 years of my college education planning, preparing, taking the LSAT, writing law school applications, asking professors to write letters on my behalf, and then realizing that wasn't what I wanted to do. And it wasn't the direction that God had been nudging me for the previous 21 years of my life. And so, you know, there was a large part of me that felt like I failed, that I spent all of this time, all of this energy, a lot of other people's time and energy, and at the end of the day I was going to say, no, that's not what it was for me. But that failure in my mind was well informed. I had a number of different internships, all in the kind of law legal background, with the district attorney's office, with a private firm in San Francisco when I was on urban semester, and also through my network, meeting with different attorneys in town, understanding what they do, the challenges that they face in their day-to-day job, the successes, the joys that they have in their career. And at the end of the day, you know, end of May, early June after graduating, I just realized, you know what, this isn't for me. And I felt comfortable with it because it was well informed, because I had tried out the job, because I'd taken advantage of the internship program, because I had talked to my network, talked to mentors, asked what their opinions were. And at the end of the day, you know, it was a failure, but it was a well-informed one. And one that has really set me up to do what I'm doing now, and I'm so thankful for that. And I think it's, you know, really, truly, failure is part of the process. You have a great network here at Westmont. Lean on them, you know, come to them with the decisions, because it's going to happen. And, you know, you might start a job and realize you don't like to do it. You might be doing a job way too much and realize that wasn't, you know, really what your priorities should be. But at the end of the day, we all make mistakes. No one's perfect. I think we're all well aware of that. But recognize all of the benefits that you can take away from that sort of an experience.
Josh, you're reminding me of a quotation that I read last week. And it's so apropos to what you're saying, and that is that most people think of success and failure as opposites, but they're more like hero and sidekick. It's like failure is totally part of the process, and if it's all kind of how your mindset is about it. Do you equate it as, you know, I failed, therefore I am a failure, or I failed and this is a tremendous opportunity to learn and grow and get better, and I think that's it. that's one of the most crucial things is your perspective and kind of having a mindset of growth as you're graduating, because it's kind of it can be kind of a scary time, and there's so many unknowns, and when you have such a firm foundation at Westmont, and if you kind of have a go-get-'em attitude, I think you'll go far.
I'd say the one thing that I would add is you don't have to have everything figured out by the time you graduate Westmont. My dad is 65 and retired, and he told me he still doesn't know what he wants to do with his life. So I mean, I really can't stress enough, like, don't stress about if you pick a job, you're going to be stuck in it for the rest of your life. There's time to change, and you're never going to be too old to switch up what you want to do and find something that you really enjoy.
Wow. I love your advice. Thank you so very much. I want to give you a We are closing in on 4:30. I wanted to tell my class that I will be in touch with you by email. But I did want to give people a chance to ask questions right now, and to our entire panel while they're here. And if there are none, we'll do so individually. But we'd love to hear from you if you have a question or a comment.
I have a question. Josh, you mentioned you were taking night classes in business, some business school. Have either of you two thought about continuing your education, or do you feel like the education you got at Westmont was enough, or do you feel like you would need to continue with like a certificate program or a master's degree or something?
Yeah, I thought a lot about going back to school to get my master's. I felt like that was kind of the logical next step, and so many people I know were doing that. And I had plans. I'd gone to an orientation. I was really gunning in that direction, and I realized that I would get more of an education on site in my job than I would in a classroom. And a lot of people that I knew who'd gotten master's degrees, it was because it was a box that needed to be checked to apply for a job that they wanted. And I've kind of come to a decision that until it becomes the thing that's keeping me from where I want to be in my career, that I really feel like my Westmont education has served me very, very well, and has gotten me to where I am.
The position that I'm in right now, I don't think there is a graduate program that could help me further than the learning that I do every single day, figuring stuff out. I've definitely been considering going back to school. I still think of myself as young though, so it's something that I keep open for possibility in the future for sure.
Another question?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, initially when you graduated, what did you do specifically and practically to look for a job? Did you immediately start drawing on the connections you had made? How did the school help you through that? How did you segue kind of from internships into finding actual professional position?
Great. It's a great question. That pretty much around what were my first steps, what were our first steps once we graduated in terms of trying to find a job. I think practically that's wonderful. What I did, it took me probably the summer to realize that I needed to start looking for a job. I was swinging a hammer building houses and stuff all summer, and didn't really get serious about it until the fall. But my first steps were trying to get out and meet with people to learn about what they do. And it wasn't, my intention with these first rounds of meetings was never to get a job, never to have someone say you should apply for this position that we have open. It was to get out and meet with as many different people as I possibly could and understand what they did, what they liked, what they didn't like. I went out to coffee a lot, bought a lot of people lunch. I think one of the easiest things about being up here is all we're doing is talking about ourselves and our own experiences, and that's something that everyone can do and everyone probably likes to do to some degree. So I would say, have courage. People like talking about themselves. Ask them out to lunch. Just, hey, I want to pick your brain, hear about your experience, hear about what it took to get to where you are today. Those were some of the very first steps that I took. That helped me figure out what it was that I wanted to do. And you know, one of the things that I look for kind of students that we're hiring, you know, people that are pretty early on in their career, is an ability to articulate the job that you want. And you can't do that unless you know what it is. And the only way you'll know what you want to do is through talking to other people. And you know, I want to work for a big company. Well, what do you want to do for a big company? I want to work in finance. Well, what do you want to do in finance? And unless you can start to articulate that, you're never going to be able to truly make a convincing argument to sell your ability to do that job well.
Well, practically speaking, I somehow thought I would get a job through applying online to the jobs I saw posted. I think I really thought that would happen. When I was first looking for a job, I thought, you know, these are all these job offerings. I will apply, I'll put my resume, I'll do a great cover letter, and they'll call me and I'll get hired. It'll be great. That doesn't happen very often. It really is about who you know. It really is, and keeping up those contacts. And the best jobs that I have gotten have all been through people that I know.
I stumbled into my job. I was very, I want to say lucky, just because things kind of fell in place for me. But looking back on it, I think practically speaking, I wouldn't depend only on your resume in order to get you a job. I think a lot of the people that apply for our company, that they could be well qualified, but we can't really tell what they are like as a person. You know, an employer is not necessarily going to look at just your major and what experience you have. You know, they want to see that you're enthusiastic and that you're creative, so you can show that, you know, through your cover letter, through correspondence with them, anything that you can show them that you're enthusiastic about. So yeah, that's how to try to get there. Or you can stumble on it. I recommend that too.